Hello and welcome to Car Dealer Live. I'm James Bagger, I'm the founder of Car Dealer Magazine, and today on the show I'm chatting with the experts from the eBay Motors Group about used car prices and much more. On the show I've got Phil Jones, he's the head of eBay Motors Group, Mark Robinson, he's the head of external sales, and Dermot Kelleher, who's the head of marketing research. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Hey, James.
Hi.
Thank you ever so much for joining me. Now, just a quick intro to the group and the guys. Firstly, a bit of background. eBay Motors Group was formed after the acquisition of the motors.co.uk brand by eBay Classified Group last year. The second largest classified advertising site in the UK, or group in the UK, with millions of monthly buyers, similar number of searches and 8,000 dealers across eBay, Gumtree and motors.co.uk. Phil's been with the brand since 2010. He specialised before that as a chartered accountant for tech and media companies. Mark's been with the group since 2018, and before that he worked in the car dealer world for the likes of Pendragon, Virtue and Inchcape. And Dermot's been with the brand for 10 years and 2 decades worth of experience in digital marketing, previously working for the likes of the Evening Standard, Metro and JobSite. Now, if you're watching this on YouTube and you've got any questions about advertising online or used car prices, please send them in and I'll ask the guys. But firstly, we'll kick things off with mine. Dermot, I'm going to turn to you. Dealers have gone back to work yesterday. Thankfully, they're all back doing some business. What have you seen so far with regards to demand from those dealers?
Yeah, so to kind of, we're thinking about it in terms of from kind of February onwards, we've seen 5 broad phases and we're in the 5th of those phases right now. So pre-outbreak, demand was quite strong across our platforms. We were sort of tracking about 25% up year on year. And that was ticking along quite nicely until sort of Wednesday, the 11th of March, where actually it started to slow down. So the second phase was kind of slowed down. And that really accelerated then from 17th of March onwards, which was the time when nurseries and schools, we knew that they were going to shut on the 20th. Then you get into the third phase, which was lockdown, which is the 24th onwards. And then we saw sessions and replies actually shrink quite a lot, quite significantly. There was still some volume, but it was well down on where it would have been year on year. Then actually from the end of April onwards, we've seen kind of a slow recovery where we were kind of tracking at around about 10% below last year. But then actually from the 10th of May onwards, and this is the final phase that we're in now, so post the VE bank holiday, actually it's been really strong. So dealers, I think, over the last 2 weeks, will probably have seen quite a strong level of activity from their vehicles on sites like ours or on their own website. But the most significant thing is the volume of calls and emails has gone up really substantially. So to give you some context, visitors to our sites over the last 2 weeks compared to the same 2 weeks last year, visitors are up 10%. Yes, but telephone calls and telephone leads that be generated are up 25%, and email leads that be generated are up 65%. So it's actually there's a re-emergence of people who've maybe built up their demand over the last couple of months. Inevitably, this sort of pent up demand argument, and we'll go on to talk about what we think the drivers that might be in the mid to kind of long term, no doubt. But right now we're seeing the unlocking of that demand, and it's a really, really strong level of calls and emails, I guess, replacing some of that behavior might have been walk-ins as well, that people now know that they're going to have to ring up to book an appointment. So really strong last 2 weeks, and that's definitely been the case yesterday as well.
Dermot, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit here with a question about what you think might happen going forward, because a lot of people are saying this was a pause. This was a pause in the market. Used car price is going to pause, and I know we're going to go into that in a little bit more detail now. But what do you think in terms of the wider economy and job losses, etc.? Do you think that is going to have a big impact on the used car market, or do you think this is just this sort of pent-up demand is going to continue?
I mean, I'll talk briefly and then I might hand it over to Phil just from a kind of wider economic perspective. But there's definitely going to be push and pull factors, and there's reasons to be cheerful and there's reasons to be uncertain as to what's going to happen. I mean, the reasons to be cheerful are this unlocking of pent-up demand. I think we're definitely seeing from surveys that we've done consumer concern over using public transport as they seek to go back to work, and undoubtedly people are exploring buying their own vehicle or and scooters as it and motorbikes as well as it happens. We've also got the kind of reason to be cheerful if you're a used car dealer in terms of potentially the lack of new car availability. You know, what's that going to do to people who are looking to buy a nearly new used car? Is that going to increase sales? But you're right, against that is the end of furloughing. And what does that mean for the kind of wider economy? We've got, more working from home. So maybe for all those people that are thinking about buying a new vehicle because they don't want to get on public transport, well, potentially they're not going to be needing to travel quite as often. And then obviously you've got recession, at some point in the future and what that means. I think Phil might have additional thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think volatility is sort of the watchword. This is what I keep sort of trying to play to our finance team as well. I would probably rather be a used car dealer than a new car dealer right now, I think, because I think they are going to be challenged with new car, certainly just even from a production point of view, let alone kind of consumer confidence. And with this volatility, with this kind of pause in activity, it's driving people into the market. And I think we're going to see a really fascinating period where we know we've got high demand. We might have a mixture of demand as well, particularly with leases coming back from 2017, brings a lot of new car buyers. They might not be able to buy new cars. They might be forced into used car. So demand might actually stay relatively positive because of this volatility. Then you've got supply, the wholesale chain is starting to reactivate. And then the other variable in this is capacity. As dealer groups are trying to work out the speed at which they kind of open up their dealerships, can they deal with all the leads? Can they handle it appropriately? So, and then there will inevitably be, some businesses that need to liquidate stocks. There might be kind of pressures on prices in those industries. It's going to be absolutely a fascinating mix of supply, demand, and capacity, and that's the volatility that we're watching out for. Which is why I think the focus is being kind of adept and flight of foot wherever possible.
The other thing is, Phil, there'll be a lot of people like myself who have suddenly started working from home. That's probably going to be, in inverted commas, the new normal for me. And I've realised I very rarely use the car that's sat outside. I can walk most places and actually prefer not to use it. I mean, there's going to be a lot of people out there like that who are suddenly going to decide they're going to want to sell their cars. I mean, has that been considered by anybody?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that is matched by an increase in people who don't want to use public transport as well. So all of this drives activity. So it's the type of cars that people want to are looking at. And actually, Mark and I were having this conversation. Mark's in exactly the same position around what car do you change to next. So it's going to be different. So I think all that introduces opportunity, because there will be spikes in demand. I mean, if I had a load of electric cars, I suspect you could do a roaring trade in them, but there's not enough of those, which drives people into kind of the whole second choice thing. So it's that volatility that's going to make the big difference, and riding those waves.
I mean, just to add to that, I mean, work is one thing that people use their cars for, but as and when other activities like dropping kids to school, as and when I've got personal anecdote, but my kids play football and they swim. Like, you can't do those things at home. You've got to go to swimming pool. So actually, it will be when those things hit back in again. It's not just the increased working from home; it's how it facilitates the other areas of your lifestyle that I think we're in. It's definitely feels quiet and people are using their cars less right now. But as soon as those extracurricular activities, in particular for families, kick in again, I think you'll feel like you're using your car a bit more. That's just sort of a personal side.
Phil, let me just go into a little bit more detail for those people who have been watching the motors.co.uk journey. I mean, just talk to us a little bit about the eBay Motors Group acquisition and what that has created.
Yeah, I mean, it's super exciting. I mean, Dermot, Mark, and I are kind of the luckiest guys in the world, and we've continued to grow with the business being acquired. So, we kind of set up by the Daily Mail in 2007, and we helped sell a business to Cox Automotive, where we kind of say we kind of got our automotive wings and learned enormous about the automotive industry. And the acquisition from eBay Classified Group last year was significant as well, because eBay Classified Group, is a global portfolio of businesses, historically quite strong in what we kind of call horizontals, which is sort of general buy and sell, which generate huge amount of traffic and vibrancy. But they're actually now realizing that attaching those to a strong vertical, which is, an industry specialist website, allows you to create kind of the best of both worlds, with lots of traffic, but also kind of industry expertise. And we've done that in Germany with Mobile, which is kind of the market leader over there, and eBay Kleinanzeigen, which kind of, real sort of powerhouses. And so it was a real good acquisition, because in the UK you had eBay and Gumtree Motors selling as a combined proposition, and you had motors.co.uk. And effectively what the eBay and Gumtree businesses need was, reporting tools and the industry kind of insight and specialities that we had over on the motors.co.uk side. And what we wanted on the motors.co.uk side was more audience and eyeballs, and actually stick these things together. eBay and Gumtree have got huge amounts of traffic coming to them, with tools and insight and expertise from motors.co.uk. You combine those and actually make a really compelling proposition, which allows dealers to reach millions of car buyers through, across multiple websites at multiple stages of their journey, and frankly, at great value as well. So it was a really exciting acquisition, because it wasn't about buying these things and kind of close one bit off. It was absolutely about growth and having kind of as many fishing hooks out there in the internet as possible to try and land car buyers for dealers.
Phil, the online classified market is incredibly competitive, and I know from chatting to all the dealers I do speak to, it's a massive expense to a lot of them, probably the biggest expense to most of them after staff, and a lot of them don't like paying it. I mean, what would you say to those sorts of people about your proposition and what makes you unique?
Yeah, I mean, the most important thing with all of your advertising, kind of whether it's classifieds, paid search, anything, is understanding what the return on investment is. So it feels expensive if you're not getting a return for it. So you need to be looking at how many leads are you getting, how many page views, is it working for you? So the analogy I try to use with customers is, don't think of it as advertising. Think of it as a salesperson who's wandering the streets of your local town, sharing pictures of your cars to people who have told us they are interested in cars like that. We're effectively an extended part of the sales team. And that's how we want to be kind of seen. We are helping getting consumers into the dealerships. And post-lockdown, that's probably more important than ever, right? Because consumers need that confidence. They're more likely to pick up the phone, more likely to send an email, because they want to have they want to know that car's available. They want to know they can transact safely. So I think that the challenge out there is, if it feels too expensive, sit down and do your maths and look at how many leads you're getting, how many vehicle views you're getting, and try and calibrate that. And unfortunately, marketing is going to be a cost of sale, and it's a really, really important one for you. But also, just make sure it's efficient.
And Phil, there'll be a lot of dealers out there who have really enjoyed the help that suppliers like yourselves have given them over this time. I'm sure I'm right in saying that you did free advertising for the last 2 months and have cut it for the current month. There's going to be a lot of them worried that that's going to mean that price is going to go up. I mean, what would you say to those guys?
Well, do you know what? I mean, our business is nothing without car dealers. And so we are kind of, everyone's got their ears to the ground and chatting to customers to try and get some feelings. We want to support dealers throughout this. I mean, it's fascinating though, seeing the activity that's coming through our sites and the number of leads proves that we are able to kind of do this job for customers. So in the first, kind of few weeks, it is kind of panic stations. You're thinking people can't buy cars, this almost informs the discounting, because there's no ability to sell. Actually, that's now there. It's just now about how they unlock it. And Mark's team are having those conversations with our customers, make sure we support them, because this isn't about trying to make a quick buck in June or July. We're trying to build a business for the future. And that's why we were fortunate enough to be able to make that huge investment and support dealers through those months.
Mark, what are you seeing from or hearing from the dealers that you're chatting to about the current marketplace and their hopes going forward?
Yeah, that's a great question, James. I think there's a number of views at play here. So I think without a doubt there's a short term view, which is, and I must say I've been really impressed. You know, just in terms of the innovative kind of approach, the entrepreneurial spirit that we've kind of seen during lockdown from dealers. I think it's been fantastic. It's a testament to our industry as well. So without a doubt, there's been a real short-term view on readiness, you know, absolute readiness for this week. And it was great to see yesterday some fantastic stories of dealers reopening. I saw some great videos across LinkedIn of a number of sites who are doing absolutely the right thing. So number one, yeah, is readiness for June in effect, which is the obvious things in terms of ensuring your business is ready to open, ensuring you can comply to the government guidelines, but really thinking about as a business, as a dealer, how you can convey your readiness to your audience. I think that's really, really important. You know, not only utilizing your own website, social media, but also platforms such as ours. So there's a lot of activity kind of around that short-term view. And then also it's also about the longer-term view in terms of, you know, how ready is your business for whatever that new norm will be, and then just ensuring that you've got that flexible approach, because without a doubt, June will probably feel very different to July. And you know, I would just ensure that flexibility is key in terms of medium-term success. So I think it's about getting out that short-term view and then just kind of taking your head up and looking at a longer-term view. How ready are you in terms of your digital presence? And then ultimately ask your question as a dealer. You know, I think the $1 million question for me is, and I wrote this down earlier, you know, are you ready to operate in a world with no walk-ins? And I think that's a great question to ask. So just ensure that your digital presence, and Dermot said around kind of that 65% uplift in email leads, you've got to be ready for that as a dealer in terms of your approach and how you handle those inquiries.
And Mark, just one more, just before I turn to Dermot on the actual detail of the used car prices. One of the things that we have seen, especially when we've judged our used car awards every year, is actually so few dealers get back to us when we send them an email inquiry. I mean, to be honest with you, it's incredibly disappointing when the people who are putting themselves up as the best in the business can't even answer email inquiries. Off the back of this, are you seeing a massive sea change in how dealers treat online inquiries, and are they getting better at it? Because a lot of them needed to. Mark, I think
Mark may have.
Yeah, we might. I mean, Dermot, do you want to pick that one up? I mean, if you heard it.
Yeah, I did. No, I mean the reality is, James, with our setup, we don't necessarily see the end-to-end conversation between consumer and dealer. We do know that there is a disconnect between what independent dealers in particular. You know, independent dealers really like telephone calls. That's the one that they want, because it allows them quite quickly to understand quite a lot about the consumer. You know, have they got anything to sell? What's driving the purchase? What finance do they need, etc., etc. And yet, even though these are weird times, we're still seeing the continuation of a lot of our traffic is peaks in the evenings. You know, when historically dealerships aren't open, so consumers don't generate a telephone call because they don't necessarily think the dealer's there, and to an extent it's about control as well. They want to be able to manage the conversation, and they are much more comfortable doing that with email. So I think there is a kind of effort on our part and the dealer's part to make sure that we treat email leads as well as we would a telephone lead, to your point about it not disappearing. But there's also an expectation, I think, on the consumer side as well, that they need to respond to those emails that are coming from the dealers, because I think, you know, this kind of email exchange can get lost in the web ether, and that can be the fault of the consumer as well as the dealer. So it's just trying to work out better ways to keep that dialogue going. But I think it is inevitable that people will be doing more from their desktop, and they will expect high levels of personalized messages in return. So they will want, quite a lot of detail in the email replies. And they absolutely, I think any dealership that can start thinking about how they can offer an ability to book a test drive and select a slot so that person can turn up, I think could see quite a lot of traction quite quickly, like you do with a restaurant, or like one used to do with a restaurant between.
Yeah. And I think, James, I echo your point around kind of people taking this seriously, because consumers very quickly get bored. And if they don't get that reply, they are off. And, we're all very good at measuring sales. We're not very good at measuring the lost sales. And so that is the urgency, I guess, we kind of instill in the teams, is that consumer who has sent an email at 9 o'clock at night has done so for a reason. People don't send emails to car dealers for fun. They are doing it because they're seriously interested. And there is a number of signals that the consumer is giving you, and you've got to take it seriously. And provide all that data. And Mark's right, the walk-in is going to be less likely. So you've got to hold the hand of the consumer and kind of gently tug them into the dealership.
Let's move on to used car prices. Dermot, what are you seeing happening to used car prices at the moment?
I mean, we looked at this in anticipation of this call today, and looking at the end of May to the beginning, from the beginning of May to the end of May, prices are broadly stable is what we're seeing. So we take a basket of 50 most popular makes and models on the site, and we can see that on average prices have increased just a touch. They've increased by 0.7%. Overall, there are some nuances within that, as you might expect, but and effectively one of the cuts we've looked at is independent dealers' pricing strategy versus franchises, and independents seem to have increased by 2.7% over that period, so almost like increased prices by 3%, and franchise dealers conversely have dropped by 0.6%. So there's kind of a bit of a mix effect going on there. We also know that commercial vehicles have increased price the most, in particular some specific vehicles. I guess that's potentially as there's increased demand from people who were in hospitality type jobs that are looking for other career avenues and needing to buy vehicles that facilitate, I don't know, delivery jobs, for example. And we've also seen a huge increase in not necessarily prices per se, but huge increases in volume of inquiries to scooters as well. So we'll look at the scooters and the motorbikes angle as well, because again, these are things that potentially fill that need for a safe journey to work that we talked about earlier, for people who maybe don't have a huge amount, who they live in quite congested urban cities as well. So overall trends are broadly stable, and I can just give a little bit more detail, but when we look at things like the vehicles that have increased in price the most, that they are the Ford Focuses, the Ford Transits, the Vauxhall Vivaros, and Renault Clio. So it's quite a normal batch of vehicles that we're talking about here. It's not the kind of super premium. It's the core 3 to 6 year old vehicles that tend to that have dealers are holding their price for now, as they seek, I guess, to try and leverage this unlocking of demand over the next couple of weeks. I think we may see further changes or more significant changes into July.
Mark, thank you for that. Mark, one of the things we're hearing from dealers already is that they're really struggling to get hold of good quality stock. The dealers you're speaking to, are they having similar problems?
Yeah, that supply and demand is going to be really important. So there is stock out there naturally for dealers at this point in time. I think there's the overhang from March to deal with, which will be happening now. That will enable the part exchanges to come back into the marketplace that perhaps weren't fully transacted towards the end of March. We are seeing some wholesale activity, particularly obviously online from the larger auction houses, and they are moving towards an environment where they can operate also on a face-to-face basis as well. So, but inevitably, I think there will come a period post, I guess, dealing with the end of March backlog where stock will be in short supply, and that'll prove an interesting dynamic just then in terms of prices and what happens to used car prices in the marketplace.
Phil, what are you seeing from your European counterparts and the rest of the world when it comes to the demand and used car prices? I mean, are you hearing anything from those markets that can give us some hope going forward?
Yeah, it's been fascinating being part of a group that's got kind of businesses in, you know, different markets. So, you know, the first business that we had that kind of got affected was Italy. Well, actually, we've got a Shanghai business intelligence team, and we're all sort of joking about them all working from home and thinking this sounds all a bit far-fetched. And then suddenly, you know, our Italian business is closed, and you know they can only go out to buy a loaf of bread. It's really interesting. And then kind of Germany, which is kind of, you know, had a slightly shallower curve to us, and also Canada. So we've all seen a similar thing in terms of demand, in terms of the pent-up demand kind of kicking back and exaggerating. Our Netherlands business has actually seen that start to kind of plateau, kind of 2 weeks kind of post kind of easing. I mean, these are all sort of slightly different lockdown measures. So the spike that we're seeing now will flatten off. It won't keep going up, which I guess is a relief probably to many people. Pricing strategy across the board has actually seemed to be relatively stable. I think most people have taken the view there is no market, so there's nothing to price to. We now come into this real interesting crunch point of some people will need to liquidate stock just for cash, the shortage of wholesale stock, high consumer demand, a shift in demand, so a shift to commercial vehicles, potentially smaller vehicles, which just kind of creates all these cases. So I think again you'll see volatility when you take the broad average. The average might not change that much, but there'll be kind of real spikes within there. So it's really interesting. But you know, certainly our Italian businesses, our German business, and actually even Australia is coming out of it. They are seeing that, you know, there is normality kind of returning, and you know, this isn't a kind of a spike and then it kind of crashes down again. And, you know, dealers are getting themselves ready. And I guess the longer term changes, people have gone through so much change in a short period of time to understand that they need to be help to sell cars more digitally, you know, from buy online through to answering an email. You know, these are kind of engendering kind of a number of longer term changes. So it's quite exciting, but yeah, no dramas on pricing just yet.
Dermot, you've mentioned some of those cars that have risen in value there. I mean, have you seen any at the opposite end of the scale? We were chatting to Andrew North yesterday from Alexander's Prestige, saying the £100,000 to £200,000 range was really tough. I mean, are there any other areas where you're seeing difficulties?
No, I mean, as I say, James, for the purposes of creating a sort of stable basket, we kind of look at the top 50 most popular, so those 100,000, 200,000 vehicles that wouldn't fit within that profile. It's quite hard to sort of get a sense. I can tell you the ones that have, you know, decreased in price by 2%. So Fiat 500 is less than 3 years old, BMW 2 Series, Volkswagen Golf 3 to 6 years. You know, these are. And you know, there's quite a significant volume of these cars. We're talking, you know, baskets of at least 1,000 of each of these types of vehicles. But it's hard to glean a real pattern. I wouldn't say like in the past. It's been much easier to say upmarket German saloons, right? They're the ones where there's price softness, or conversely super minis, there's huge demand. I'm not seeing that. I think it's more mixed, and actually probably in truth not as clear as to whether or not there's any one particular type of either manufacturer or vehicle segment that's clearly winning or losing at this stage. You know, again, I think I would expect more separation as that as kind of this initial burst of people being able to test drive and then purchase vehicles, as that kind of comes to its initial end, probably sometime in July. I think we'll get another view as to what dealers will need to do in order to make their stock deem attractive, balanced with, as we've already discussed, the fact that there might be a shortage of supply. So that might in turn help reinforce the asking prices.
Phil, what worries you most about the used car market going forward?
Frankly, it's probably the risk of business failures, and I can see a number of dealerships that were kind of on the line. You know, anyway, you know, used cars isn't kind of famous for its high profit margins, and some of these kind of businesses carry high fixed costs. That's the thing that worries me. It's great to see people out there trading again, and everyone's been really sensible on cash flow, but there's a critical mass we kind of need to get ourselves back to. Otherwise, people are just operating loss-making businesses. We haven't seen much of that come through in our data yet, but as an accountant and kind of as a miser, those are the things I'm kind of keeping an eye out for.
I mean, I think the crunch point, as I've been told, is going to come in October after a lot of cash outflow in September. So I suppose that's certainly one that we need to keep on our horizons in the not too distant future. Phil, what do you think is going to change about dealerships? I mean, this has been a very, very turbulent time for the business. A lot of them have invested very quickly in their online buying experience. Do you think that's going to accelerate the way people buy cars in the future?
Yeah, I mean, if you kind of want to be sort of optimistic, kind of following my sort of my morbid statement there, this period has forced dealers to embrace change that was already coming. So because dealers kind of operate on relatively low margins and they're under so much pressure, like on a quarterly basis, it's been really hard to take those decisions to kind of invest in buying online platforms or invest in your kind of your digital team. It's been hard because there's been the day-to-day challenge. This has forced people to take those actions. So that, I think, culturally will be the big shift going forward. So being able to take emails, calls, live chat, being able to support people with contactless sales, home delivery, all that sort of stuff. That's got to be the future, right? I mean, but people still need the car dealer. So it's not that this becomes a soulless experience. There will be some people who are kind of confident enough, but it's the role of the dealer to kind of hold the hand of the consumer, make sure they're buying the right car, give them the confidence and the reassurance through that process. So it's all the old skills that were there, but just delivering it in a format that's kind of fitting with the modern age.
Mark, are the dealers you're talking to ready for this change?
Yeah, I'm actually really positive. I think what we know is that pent up demand, and we did some research actually, and there's a great stat in there, which was 76% of buyers were willing to buy within 2 to 3 months after lockdown. So, actually, my advice is be ready for that demand. There's nearly 80% of people out there who are willing to buy a car. So get ready, I think is number one, and that's what we've been seeing happening, as we said. And I think, as Phil said, there's a really important part that dealers can really play in this process. Think about the value of the test drive and how that works in the process, and just think about the value in terms of the information that the salesperson can offer. But that might be done in a different way. That might be done either over email or over the telephone rather than face to face and via that walk-in. But actually, there's a really important part to play for our dealers in this process as we move to something which will feel a lot very different.
Phil, a slightly different topic, but I noticed in the papers at the weekend that the eBay classified business was up for sale, and there was some interest from, I believe it was a German publisher. I mean, how's that going to affect business going forward, and what are your thoughts on that?
Well, obviously, I mean, I kind of know as much as you guys in terms of what's in the press. I'm not kind of in the loop at all. eBay Classified Group is a highly attractive business. It's it's got significant scale. It's got some really kind of valuable assets in these key markets. We've loved being part of eBay and being taken in, and within eBay Classified Group as well. Having that focus on driving motors, and so any kind of future or potential owner will be looking at that and thinking, right, here's a business that's got real scale, geographic reach, and a growing presence in motors. So I think it's a really exciting opportunity for us to kind of keep going there. And if it doesn't, well, we've actually got a really good strategy anyway, and we're kind of getting on with executing it. So it's in the papers for the right reasons, because it's an attractive and fast growing business. And so, that kind of makes me feel proud to be part of that.
Cracking on regardless, I'm sure. Phil, finally, a question to you, and I'll ask the same question to the others. But if you were running a dealership today, what would you be focusing on as your number one priority?
I think at the moment it's about making sure your teams are trained up to provide reassurance to to consumers to think about the concerns that they would have in the same way that you'd have the concerns if you go into B&Q. You know, put yourself in the shoes of the consumer, and that's always kind of the biggest advice I can give anyway. But people are just going to need that more reassurance, and that means in the way you take images, the way you upload your ads, but just culturally in the way your team speak to people.
Mark, same question to you. What would you be concentrating on if you were back in your car dealer world?
Yeah, I would just really practical advice. You know, focus on the basics. You know, ask yourself that question that I said earlier. You know, are you ready to operate in a world with no walk-ins? So make sure you've got a robust telephone and email inquiry process, and test them. You know, actually make it really easy for consumers to contact you, whether it's in hours or out of hours, and be flexible in that approach. Thank you.
And Dermot, finally, what would you be saying to your staff who are running a dealership?
I mean, I would echo all of those sentiments, and you know, maybe it is a question of having to put more thought and effort into inquiries that come your way. You know, is that Audi A3 for sale? You know, the temptation is, no matter, you know, because it's you know, a pretty stressful and frantic time, is yes, it's still for sale. You know, end of conversation. Well, actually, what I think the consumer's looking for, yes, please come down. We've got X, Y, and Z in place to make sure that it's safe. You know, this is a cracking vehicle. It's got, you know, I think you'll really like it because it's got X, Y, and Z features. It is that additional layer of effort, and just keeping that perspective of, it might be one of the inquiries you received that day, but for the other person, it's the only car they're interested in. So how do you make sure that you maintain that sort of level of quality and care across all of it when things are very strange and very stressful around you within the dealership?
Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time today. I really appreciate you giving up your time and chatting to me. And please keep us abreast of what happens in the used car market going forward. We've been covering it extensively on the website, and your insight has been very helpful. So please keep sending it our way. So a huge thanks to the eBay Motors Group team there for joining us. This week on the show, we've got some more great guests. Tomorrow, it's Chorley Group's Adam Turner. On Thursday, we're chatting to Marshall Motor Group once again. And on Friday, we're doing another Logistics Live, taking your legal questions and putting them to the team there. If you want to get involved in Car Dealer Lives like this one, you can email me. It's james@blackbullmedia.co.uk. You can find me on Twitter at Car Dealer Ed, or send me a message on LinkedIn. We'd love to have you on the show. And if you want breaking news sent direct to your phone, we've set up a number of WhatsApp groups where we share the most important breaking news stories. Just send me a message at one of those methods I've already mentioned, and I'll send you a link to join. If you want to find out who's going to be on the shows in the coming weeks, log on to cardealermagazine.co.uk, head to the Car Dealer Live section, and there's a full schedule of what's coming up next. That leaves me to say thanks once again to the eBay Motors Group team there for giving up their time. I won't be here tomorrow. I'm going to hand this over to James Batchelor, who's back helping us out. He's going to be doing his first show, so treat him gently. I'll be taking a little break, but I'll be back on Thursday. So thanks very much for joining me today, and goodbye.